Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The calm before the storm. The airport buzzed with the usual morning chaos, hurried footsteps, scattered announcements, and the constant hum of conversation. Ava Carter, a poised and confident woman in her early 30s, stepped into the terminal with a calm demeanor that seemed to part the sea of hurried travelers around her. She wore a tailored navy blazer over a sleek white blouse, paired with slim trousers that accentuated her elegance. Her natural curls framed her face, giving her an air of both authority and warmth. In one hand, she carried a leather laptop bag, in the other, a boarding pass for seat 2A in first class. Ava had always believed in planning ahead, and this trip was no exception. A corporate strategist by trade, she was flying out for a high-stakes business presentation that could redefine her career. But more importantly, this flight marked a personal milestone, proof that hard work and resilience could overcome the barriers she'd faced as a woman of color in a competitive industry. As she approached the gate, Ava glanced at her phone for the 100th time, double-checking the boarding details. It was her ritual, a way to soothe the quiet nerves that always accompanied her travels. The gate agent smiled as Ava scanned her boarding pass, and she reciprocated with a polite nod. She made her way down the jet bridge, oblivious to the ripple effect her confident presence was causing among the other passengers. The first-class cabin was a serene space, a stark contrast to the bustling terminal she'd just left. Ava found her seat, 2A, next to a window. She tucked her bag neatly into the overhead compartment, adjusted her seat, and pulled out her notebook. It was a habit of hers to jot down thoughts and ideas before a flight, a mental warm-up for the day ahead. As she flipped open the notebook, Ava felt the subtle weight of gazes on her. She was accustomed to the occasional curious look. Her presence often challenged people's unspoken expectations of who belonged in spaces like first class. But Ava was unbothered. She had earned her place here, and no amount of silent judgment could change that. Not long after the cabin doors closed, a flight attendant named Miranda Scott entered the scene. Miranda, in her crisp navy uniform and immaculate hair bun, exuded the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had spent years navigating the complexities of airline service. Her eyes scanned the cabin with practiced precision, landing on Ava. There was a moment, a fleeting second, when something in Miranda's gaze hardened. Ava noticed it but dismissed it as a passing look. Miranda approached with her usual professionalism, her heels clicking softly on the carpeted aisle. "Good morning," Miranda began, her voice carrying the neutral politeness of customer service. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Ava looked up, slightly surprised, but cooperative. She handed over the ticket with a small smile. "Of course." Miranda scrutinized the boarding pass longer than seemed necessary. Her frown deepened, and she glanced back at Ava, her eyes betraying a flicker of doubt. "This is for seat 2A in first class?" Miranda asked, her tone polite but clipped. "Yes, that's correct," Ava replied, her voice steady and unbothered. Miranda's lips pressed into a thin line. After an awkward pause, she returned the boarding pass without another word and walked away. Ava shrugged, dismissing the interaction as unimportant, and returned to her notebook. But Miranda was not done. At the front of the cabin, she leaned in to whisper to another flight attendant. Ava couldn't hear the conversation, but she noticed the occasional glances in her direction. The atmosphere began to shift subtly, the air thickening with unspoken tension. A few minutes later, Miranda returned, her demeanor now more authoritative. "Miss Carter," she said, her tone carrying an edge. "Could you step aside for a moment? I need to verify something." Ava raised an eyebrow but complied, standing and taking her bag with her. As she followed Miranda toward the galley, she felt the weight of the other passengers' stares. Whispers swirled around her, fragments of speculation floating in the air. At the galley, Miranda turned to face her, folding her arms. "There seems to be an issue with your booking," she began. "I'll need you to move to a different seat. It appears there's been a mistake." Ava's calm exterior cracked slightly, her brow furrowing. "A mistake? My ticket is valid, and I booked this seat weeks ago. Could you check again?" Miranda's tone turned icy. I've already checked. This seat is not appropriate for you. I'll need you to move to the main cabin. The words hung in the air like a slap. Ava's breath caught for a moment, disbelief flashing across her face. She quickly composed herself, standing tall. I don't understand. My ticket is confirmed. Why should I have to move? Miranda's voice dropped to a sharp whisper. If you don't comply, I'll have to call security. Ava's jaw tightened. For a moment, she considered standing her ground. But the growing attention from the other passengers made her reconsider. This wasn't the place or time for a confrontation. Without another word, Ava nodded and returned to her seat to gather her belongings. The first-class cabin was silent, save for the low murmur of whispers. As Ava made her way to the main cabin, escorted by Miranda, the humiliation was palpable. Passengers craned their necks to watch, their expressions ranging from pity to disapproval. In the cramped middle seat assigned to her, Ava stared out the window, her thoughts racing. She felt the sting of injustice, but also a simmering resolve. Pulling out her phone, she typed a message with swift precision. Something happened. I need this addressed immediately, she wrote, sending the message to a trusted contact. A faint smile played on her lips as she slipped the phone back into her bag. Unbeknownst to Miranda and the rest of the passengers, Ava Carter was not a woman to be underestimated. She had faced challenges far greater than this, and she knew exactly how to turn the tide in her favor. The storm brews. Ava Carter adjusted her seatbelt in the cramped confines of the main cabin, her mind racing as she processed the events of the past few minutes. The sting of public humiliation was sharp, but it wasn't new to her. Ava had faced similar slights before, moments when her competence, her presence, and even her right to exist in certain spaces were questioned. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't going to let it slide. As she gazed out the window, the faint smile from earlier returned. Ava wasn't just a corporate strategist, she was a woman who had built her career on turning adversity into opportunity. This situation, as maddening as it was, presented an opportunity she couldn't ignore. The flight attendant in the main cabin, Clara, approached Ava hesitantly, holding a cup of water. Unlike Miranda, Clara's demeanor was warm and empathetic. Ma'am, Clara said softly, leaning in so her voice wouldn't carry, is everything okay? I noticed you were moved from first class. Ava looked up, her expression unreadable. It's just a mix-up, she said evenly, taking the water. Thank you for asking. Clara hesitated, clearly sensing that there was more to the story. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know, she offered sincerely. Ava nodded, her smile genuine this time. I appreciate that. Truly. Clara walked away, leaving Ava to her thoughts. Reaching into her bag, Ava pulled out her phone again. Her fingers moved deftly across the screen as she composed another message, this time more detailed. She hit send, leaning back in her seat, and closed her eyes briefly, mentally preparing for what was to come. Meanwhile, in the first-class cabin, Miranda Scott was going about her duties, her posture rigid and her expression self-satisfied. She poured champagne into crystal flutes, smiled curtly at the passengers, and ensured their every need was met. But beneath her polished exterior, a nagging doubt gnawed at her. Something about Ava's quiet confidence unsettled her. As she served the passenger in seat 2C, a man in his late 50s with a sharp suit and an air of importance, he leaned in conspiratorially. Quite the commotion earlier, he remarked, glancing toward the rear of the plane. What was that all about? Miranda's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. Just a seating issue, she said smoothly. Nothing to be concerned about. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced, but said nothing more. Miranda moved on, but the seed of doubt had been planted. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd made a mistake that might soon have consequences. Back in the main cabin, Ava opened her notebook, flipping to a blank page. She began writing furiously, her pen gliding across the paper with purpose. Her thoughts flowed in quick succession, each one sharper than the last. This wasn't just about her, it was about the principal. The humiliation she'd faced wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern, a systemic issue that needed to be addressed. Ava paused, tapping her pen against her lip as she considered her next steps. She had already contacted a colleague who worked in media relations, a powerhouse who knew how to handle situations like this. But Ava wasn't just looking for damage control, she wanted accountability. She glanced around the cabin, taking in the diverse mix of passengers. Some were engrossed in their books or movies, others chatting softly with their seatmates. A few, however, cast discreet glances her way, their expressions a mix of curiosity and sympathy. Ava met their eyes briefly, offering a small smile before returning to her notebook. Half an hour later, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." The announcement seemed to ease the tension in the cabin, but Ava remained focused. She flipped her notebook closed and reached for her phone again, this time composing an email. Her subject line was succinct: Incident Report, Flight 827. The body of the email detailed the events that had transpired, including Miranda's actions and the impact they had on her as a passenger. Before hitting send, Ava added a line that would ensure her concerns were taken seriously: "This is not just a personal matter, it's a professional one. As a frequent flyer with your airline and a corporate consultant specializing in workplace equity, I urge you to address this incident promptly." She hit send and exhaled deeply, feeling a sense of relief. She wasn't just reacting, she was taking control. In the first-class cabin, Miranda's unease grew. She noticed Clara moving through the main cabin and called her over under the pretense of needing assistance. "How's everything in the back?" Miranda asked casually. Clara hesitated, then said, "Everything's fine. The woman you moved, Ava, I think, she seems calm, but..." She trailed off, unsure how to continue. "But what?" Miranda pressed, her tone sharper than intended. Clara shifted uncomfortably. "She just doesn't seem like the type to let something like this go." Miranda stiffened, her fingers tightening around the tray she was holding. "I handled the situation appropriately," she said curtly. "There's nothing more to discuss." Clara nodded, sensing the conversation was over. She returned to the main cabin, leaving Miranda to grapple with her growing anxiety. As the flight neared its midpoint, Ava's phone buzzed softly. She glanced at the screen and saw a reply to her email. It was from the airline's customer relations team, acknowledging her report and promising a follow-up. Ava smiled faintly, knowing this was just the beginning. But what truly caught her attention was a second message, a text from her colleague in media relations. "Got your message," it read. "Let's talk strategy when you land. This is bigger than you think." Ava's smile widened, a spark of determination lighting her eyes. She didn't need revenge, she needed resolution. And she knew exactly how to get it. As the flight continued, the atmosphere aboard the plane shifted subtly. Passengers whispered among themselves, their curiosity piqued by the earlier commotion. Ava remained composed, her calm demeanor masking the storm brewing beneath the surface. Unbeknownst to Miranda, Ava had set a plan in motion, one that would not only address the injustice she'd faced, but also force the airline to confront its own policies and practices. This was no longer just a flight, it was the beginning of a reckoning. Turning the tables. The airplane glided smoothly at cruising altitude, but the tension aboard Flight 827 was anything but calm. Ava Carter sat in the cramped middle seat of the main cabin, her mind a flurry of calculated thoughts. Her outward composure remained steadfast, but she was already orchestrating her next moves, setting into motion something far more significant than Miranda or anyone else aboard the flight could have imagined. The calm before action. Ava leaned back in her seat, closing her notebook and slipping it into her bag. Her initial messages and email had already planted the seeds for what was to come. Now, she waited, patient but alert. She was no stranger to handling difficult situations, but this wasn't just about defending herself, It was about shining a light on the broader injustices that so many people faced. As the beverage cart made its way through the aisle, Clara, the kind-hearted flight attendant, stopped at Ava's row. "Can I get you anything, ma'am?" she asked softly. "Just some water, please," Ava replied with a polite smile. Clara handed her the cup, then leaned in slightly. "I don't mean to intrude, but I hope you're okay. I saw what happened earlier, and it didn't seem right." Ava's smile grew warmer. "Thank you, Clara. I appreciate your concern. I'm fine, but I suspect this situation isn't over yet." Clara nodded, her expression conflicted. She seemed torn between loyalty to her colleague and a genuine desire to support Ava. "If there's anything I can do, please let me know." "You've done enough by being kind," Ava said, her voice gentle but firm. "Kindness goes a long way." Clara nodded again and moved on, leaving Ava with a renewed sense of resolve. There was no need for anger or confrontation. Ava's power lay in her ability to remain composed and strategic. Unseen connections. In first class, Miranda continued her duties, but her confidence was beginning to waver. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd made a misstep, a nagging sense of unease that only grew stronger as time passed. She glanced toward the main cabin occasionally, as if expecting Ava to make a scene, but Ava remained calm and quiet, her actions unreadable. What Miranda didn't know was that Ava's influence extended far beyond the confines of the airplane. At that very moment, a chain reaction was unfolding. Ava's earlier email had landed on the desk of a senior executive at the airline, someone who recognized her name and reputation. This wasn't just any disgruntled passenger. Ava was a high-profile corporate strategist who had worked with Fortune 500 companies to address systemic issues, including equity and inclusion. Her name carried weight, and her words demanded attention. The executive immediately forwarded Ava's email to the airline's internal crisis team, flagging it as a priority. Within minutes, a flurry of messages and calls were exchanged. By the time the flight landed, the airline's ground team would be fully briefed and prepared to address the situation. The whisper of change. Back on the plane, Ava's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, seeing a message from her media relations colleague, Tasha. The message was succinct but powerful. "Got the info. Drafting a statement for you. Let's talk as soon as you land." Ava felt a surge of gratitude for Tasha. They had worked together on numerous campaigns, and Tasha's ability to craft compelling narratives was unmatched. Ava knew that whatever statement Tasha prepared would not only highlight her own experience, but also call for meaningful change within the airline industry. Ava typed a quick reply, "Thank you. Let's strategize after the flight. This needs to be bigger than me." She tucked her phone away and turned her attention back to her surroundings. The hum of the engines and the chatter of passengers filled the cabin, but Ava remained focused. Her actions so far had been quiet, almost invisible to those around her, but the impact would soon be impossible to ignore. The catalyst. About halfway through the flight, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom again, this time with a surprising announcement. "Attention passengers, this is your captain speaking. We've been informed of a situation involving one of our passengers, and I want to assure everyone that it's being addressed. Please remain seated and enjoy the remainder of the flight." The announcement was vague, but it immediately sparked murmurs throughout the cabin. Ava's lips curled into a small smile. She hadn't expected the captain to address the issue mid-flight, but it seemed her message had already reached the upper echelons of the airline. Miranda, overhearing the announcement from the first-class galley, froze. Her heart sank as she realized the situation might very well involve Ava. She quickly composed herself, trying to maintain an air of professionalism, but her mind raced with questions. What had Ava done? And more importantly, what would happen next? The ripple effect. As the plane began its descent, the tension in the air was palpable. Miranda busied herself with final preparations, avoiding eye contact with the other passengers. Ava, meanwhile, remained calm, her focus unwavering. She had done all she could for now, the rest was in the hands of the airline's team and, eventually, the public. When the plane finally touched down and taxied to the gate, Ava felt a sense of relief. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but she was ready for the next phase. As the passengers began gathering their belongings, Ava waited patiently, allowing others to exit first. She noticed Clara glancing her way and gave the young flight attendant a reassuring nod. As Ava stood to retrieve her bag, Miranda approached, her expression carefully neutral. "Miss Carter," she said, her tone more subdued than before. "Thank you for your cooperation during the flight." Ava met Miranda's gaze, her own expression calm but firm. "You're welcome," she said simply, her words carrying a weight that Miranda couldn't ignore. The unexpected welcome. As Ava stepped off the plane and into the terminal, she was met by a member of the airline's ground staff, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit who introduced himself as David, the airline's regional operations manager. "Miss Carter," David began, his tone apologetic. "We received your report, and I want to personally apologize for what happened on board. We're taking this matter very seriously." Ava nodded, her demeanor professional but unyielding. "I appreciate that, David. But this isn't just about me. It's about ensuring that no one else has to experience what I did today." David nodded, clearly aware of the gravity of the situation. "We're committed to addressing this. If you're available, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you to discuss your concerns further." Ava agreed, knowing that this was just the beginning. She had no intention of letting the airline off the hook with a simple apology. This was an opportunity to push for systemic change, and Ava was determined to make the most of it. The story unfolds. As Ava left the terminal, she glanced at her phone and saw a flood of messages from colleagues, friends, and even strangers who had already caught wind of the incident through social media. The story was gaining traction, and Ava knew it wouldn't be long before the media picked it up. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenges ahead. This wasn't just about seeking justice for herself, it was about creating a ripple effect that would challenge the status quo and demand accountability. Ava Carter had been humiliated, but she had turned the tables. Now, she was ready to lead a movement. The ripple becomes a wave. As Ava Carter exited the terminal, the crisp evening air brushed against her face, grounding her in the reality of what had just transpired. Her phone buzzed incessantly, a testament to the growing momentum of her story. Every vibration reminded her that this was no longer just about one incident on one flight. It was about something far greater, a story of resilience, justice, and the fight for equity in the face of blatant prejudice. The story goes public. Ava slid into the backseat of her prearranged car and opened her phone. Her colleague Tasha had sent another text, "Draft is ready. Let me know if you want changes before we release it." Attached was a polished statement that perfectly encapsulated Ava's experience and framed it within the larger context of systemic issues. The statement began, "What happened to me on Flight 827 is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a broader issue that so many individuals face every day. Discrimination, whether subtle or overt, has no place in our society, and it certainly has no place in the services we pay for as consumers. My story is not unique, but it is an opportunity to demand accountability and change. Let this be a turning point for everyone who has ever been made to feel like they don't belong." Ava read the statement twice, her heart swelling with pride at how powerfully it articulated her experience. She sent Tasha a quick reply, "It's perfect. Let's publish." Within minutes, Tasha had shared the statement on Ava's professional social media profiles, accompanied by a detailed account of what had transpired. Ava knew her words would resonate, but she couldn't have predicted just how quickly they would catch fire. By the time her car pulled up to her hotel, Ava's phone was lighting up with notifications. Thousands of likes, shares, and comments flooded in, each one amplifying her story. Strangers from around the world voiced their support, many sharing their own experiences of discrimination and mistreatment. Ava's story had become a rallying cry for change. Behind the scenes at the airline. Meanwhile, at the airline's corporate headquarters, chaos ensued. The internal crisis team was in overdrive, scrambling to manage the growing PR nightmare. Senior executives held emergency meetings to discuss the incident, each one more tense than the last. "How did this happen?" one executive demanded, slamming his hand on the table. "We've spent millions on diversity training and customer service programs, and this is what we're dealing with?" "It's not just about the training," another executive replied. "It's about the culture. Clearly, there are gaps in how we implement these policies on the ground." The team pored over Ava's social media post, dissecting every word and analyzing the public's response. It was clear that this was no ordinary passenger complaint. Ava Carter wasn't just a wronged customer, she was a professional with a platform, and she knew how to use it effectively. "We need to get ahead of this," the head of PR said firmly. "We need to issue a public apology and reach out to her directly to discuss next steps." "But we can't stop there," another executive interjected. "This isn't just about one apology. We need a comprehensive review of our policies and practices. If we don't take real action, this will happen again, and next time, we might not be so lucky." The room fell silent as the weight of the situation sank in. The airline's reputation was on the line, and they knew it would take more than damage control to repair the trust they had lost. Ava's next steps. Back in her hotel room, Ava sat at the desk, her laptop open as she sifted through emails and messages. Offers for interviews poured in from major news outlets, each one eager to feature her story. Advocacy organizations reached out, expressing their solidarity and offering to collaborate on initiatives for systemic change. Ava knew she had to be strategic about her next steps. This wasn't just about her story, it was about leveraging the platform she now had to create lasting impact. She called Tasha to discuss their game plan. "We need to approach this carefully," Ava said, her voice steady but firm. "I don't want this to just be a viral moment. I want it to lead to something meaningful." "I agree," Tasha replied. "I've already drafted a list of potential actions we can take. We can push the airline to commit to a full review of their policies, partner with advocacy groups to create accountability measures, and even launch a public campaign to raise awareness about discrimination in the service industry." Ava nodded, feeling a sense of purpose. "Let's do it. But first, I need to meet with the airline. I want to hear directly from them what they plan to do to address this." The meeting. The following day, Ava arrived at the airline's corporate headquarters for a meeting with senior executives. She was greeted by David, the operations manager who had met her at the airport, and a small team of executives who looked visibly nervous. "Miss Carter," the CEO began, extending a hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. On behalf of the entire airline, I want to sincerely apologize for what you experienced. It was unacceptable, and we are committed to making things right." Ava shook his hand but maintained her composure. "I appreciate your apology, but words alone won't fix this. What happened to me is part of a larger problem, and I want to know what steps you're taking to ensure it doesn't happen again." The CEO nodded, gesturing for her to sit. Over the next hour, the executives outlined their plans for a comprehensive review of their policies and training programs. They promised to involve external experts in equity and inclusion to ensure their efforts were thorough and effective. "We're also committed to transparency," the CEO added. "We'll be releasing regular updates to the public about the changes we're making and the progress we're achieving." Ava listened carefully, her sharp mind picking apart their proposals. "This is a good start," she said finally. "But I want to see real accountability. That means not just reviewing your policies, but also addressing the culture that allowed this to happen in the first place." The executives nodded, taking notes as Ava spoke. It was clear that they were eager to make amends, but Ava wasn't interested in quick fixes. She wanted systemic change, and she wasn't going to settle for anything less. The wave of change. As Ava left the meeting, she felt a sense of accomplishment but also a renewed determination. The meeting was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, she worked tirelessly with advocacy groups, media outlets, and the airline itself to turn her story into a catalyst for change. The airline, under intense public scrutiny, followed through on its promises. They implemented new training programs, partnered with diversity experts, and created a public task force to address systemic issues within their organization. Miranda, the flight attendant whose actions had sparked the incident, was placed on leave pending further investigation. But the impact of Ava's actions extended far beyond the airline. Her story inspired a national conversation about discrimination in the service industry, sparking similar accounts from others and leading to calls for greater accountability across all sectors. For Ava, the journey was far from over. But as she reflected on everything that had happened, she felt a sense of hope. One voice, she realized, could make a difference. And when that voice was joined by others, it could create a wave of change. A movement is born. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ava Carter's home office, casting a warm glow over the stacks of notes, correspondence, and media clippings spread across her desk. It had been 3 months since the incident on Flight 827, and the ripple effect of her story had turned into a tidal wave of awareness and action. The airline's response, while initially met with skepticism, had proven genuine. Their commitment to addressing systemic discrimination had resulted in a series of unprecedented changes. Ava's collaboration with them had not only reshaped their internal policies, but had also sparked a larger cultural shift across the industry. But for Ava, this was just the beginning. The public speaks out. In the days following the incident, Ava's story had gone viral, but it wasn't just her experience that captured public attention. Thousands of others came forward, sharing their own stories of discrimination and mistreatment. Social media became a powerful tool for amplifying these voices, and soon, a hashtag began to trend globally, #EveryoneDeservesRespect. The hashtag became a rallying cry, uniting people from diverse backgrounds and industries. It was no longer just about one woman's experience on a flight, it was about a universal demand for fairness, respect, and dignity in every aspect of life. Ava felt a deep responsibility to channel this energy into meaningful action. With the help of her colleague Tasha and a growing network of allies, she launched an initiative called Elevate Equality, a nonprofit organization dedicated to combating discrimination and promoting inclusion in workplaces, service industries, and public spaces. Building Elevate Equality. Elevate Equality quickly gained traction, thanks in part to Ava's reputation as a corporate strategist and her growing platform as an advocate for change. The organization's mission was clear: to provide resources, training, and advocacy for individuals and businesses striving to create equitable environments. Ava and her team developed comprehensive training programs tailored to various industries, focusing on everything from unconscious bias to customer service excellence. They also partnered with legal experts to offer support to individuals who had experienced discrimination, providing them with tools to seek justice and accountability. One of Elevate Equality's most impactful initiatives was the Voices Heard Project, a digital platform where people could share their stories anonymously. The platform allowed users to highlight patterns of discrimination within specific organizations, creating a public record that encouraged accountability. Miranda's reckoning. While Ava worked tirelessly to build Elevate Equality, the fallout for Miranda Scott, the flight attendant who had removed Ava from first class, was far more personal. Miranda had been placed on leave shortly after the incident, pending an internal investigation. The airline, under intense scrutiny, was determined to handle the situation transparently. Miranda initially resisted taking responsibility, insisting that her actions were justified. But as the investigation progressed, it became clear that her decision to remove Ava was not only unjust, but also rooted in unconscious bias. Faced with mounting evidence and the public backlash, Miranda was forced to confront her own behavior. The airline required Miranda to complete an intensive training program focused on equity and inclusion. She was also encouraged to participate in a mediation session with Ava, who, despite everything, believed in the power of dialogue and redemption. The mediation was tense, but ultimately transformative. Ava approached the session with grace, her focus on understanding rather than retribution. "This isn't just about me," Ava said during the session. "It's about ensuring that no one else has to experience what I did." I hope you'll take this as an opportunity to grow. Miranda, visibly shaken, apologized sincerely for her actions. I let my biases cloud my judgment, she admitted. I'm deeply sorry for the harm I caused, and I'm committed to doing better. While the experience was painful for both women, it became a pivotal moment in Miranda's journey towards self-awareness and growth. Legislative action. Ava's story and the subsequent movement caught the attention of lawmakers, who saw an opportunity to address systemic discrimination through policy. Inspired by Elevate Equality's work, a group of senators introduced the Fair Treatment in Public Spaces Act, a bill aimed at ensuring accountability and equity across service industries. The bill proposed mandatory anti-discrimination training for employees in public-facing roles, stronger protections for individuals who experienced mistreatment, and penalties for organizations that failed to uphold these standards. Ava was invited to testify before Congress as an expert witness, sharing her experience and advocating for the bill's passage. Standing before the packed hearing room, Ava spoke with clarity and conviction. Discrimination isn't just a personal issue, it's a societal one, she said. When we fail to hold people and organizations accountable, we send a message that bias and injustice are acceptable. We must do better. Her testimony was met with a standing ovation, and the bill gained bipartisan support. Its eventual passage marked a significant victory for the movement Ava had helped to ignite. A global platform. As Elevate Equality grew, so did Ava's influence. She was invited to speak at conferences, universities, and corporate events around the world, sharing her insights on equity and inclusion. Her story was featured in documentaries, books, and even a feature film that chronicled her journey from humiliation to empowerment. Despite her rising profile, Ava remained grounded. She never lost sight of the people whose stories had inspired her to act. She often returned to the Voices Heard platform, reading through submissions and reaching out to individuals who needed support. For Ava, this work was personal, and she was determined to make a difference. The legacy of Flight 827. Years later, Ava reflected on the events of Flight 827 and how they had changed her life. What had begun as an ordinary flight had become a catalyst for extraordinary change, not just for her, but for countless others. The airline industry was now a model of accountability and inclusion, thanks in part to the reforms inspired by Ava's experience. Elevate Equality continued to thrive, expanding its reach and impact with each passing year. And the hashtag everyone deserves respect had become more than a slogan, it was a movement that had reshaped industries and lives. As Ava sat in a quiet moment of reflection, she received a notification on her phone. It was a message from a young woman who had used the Voices Heard platform to share her story. The message read, "Because of you, I found the courage to speak up. Thank you for showing me that my voice matters." Ava smiled, her heart full. The journey had been difficult, but it had been worth it. She had turned adversity into action, transforming pain into purpose. And in doing so, she had proven that one voice could indeed change the world. The global impact. Years after the fateful day on Flight 827, Ava Carter's journey had evolved into something much larger than she could have ever anticipated. What began as a personal stand against injustice had blossomed into a global movement for equity, justice, and respect. Ava had become a symbol of resilience, and her organization, Elevate Equality, was now a cornerstone of advocacy work worldwide. From stories to solutions. Elevate Equality's Voices Heard project had grown exponentially, becoming a vital resource for individuals and organizations alike. The platform had collected hundreds of thousands of personal accounts, each one shedding light on the pervasive nature of discrimination across industries, regions, and cultures. These stories weren't just archived, they were analyzed and transformed into actionable insights. With the help of data scientists, psychologists, and policy experts, Ava and her team developed comprehensive reports highlighting patterns of inequity. These reports were shared with governments, corporations, and advocacy groups, driving policy changes and cultural shifts around the globe. One such report revealed that women of color in the service industry faced disproportionately high levels of bias and mistreatment. Armed with this data, Elevate Equality launched the Inclusion in Service Initiative, a global campaign aimed at addressing systemic discrimination in customer-facing roles. The campaign provided training resources, mentorship programs, and recognition awards for organizations that demonstrated exemplary commitment to equity. The turning point for Miranda. For Miranda Scott, the flight attendant at the center of the original incident, life had changed dramatically as well. After completing the airline's intensive equity training program, she decided to step away from her role and pursue a different path. Miranda began volunteering with Elevate Equality, sharing her story as a cautionary tale and an example of personal growth. At first, Miranda's involvement was met with skepticism. Many questioned whether her actions could ever be redeemed. But over time, her honesty and willingness to confront her own biases won people over. She became a powerful advocate for change, using her platform to encourage others to reflect on their own behaviors and assumptions. In one memorable moment, Miranda joined Ava on stage at a major conference, where the two women shared their perspectives on the incident that had brought them together. Their conversation was raw, emotional, and inspiring, a testament to the possibility of reconciliation and growth. "I was wrong," Miranda said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But because of Ava's grace and determination, I was given a chance to learn and change. I hope my story can help others do the same." The audience erupted in applause, moved by the vulnerability and courage displayed by both women. The ripple reaches further. As Elevate Equality's impact grew, so did Ava's opportunities to collaborate with global leaders. She was invited to address the United Nations, where she spoke about the importance of systemic change in tackling discrimination. Her words resonated deeply, leading to the adoption of new international guidelines for equitable treatment in public and private sectors. "Equity is not just a policy, it's a mindset," Ava said in her address. "It's about recognizing the humanity in everyone and creating systems that uphold dignity and respect for all. Together, we can build a world where no one feels like they don't belong." Ava's speech was broadcast worldwide, inspiring countless individuals and organizations to take action. Governments began implementing anti-discrimination policies modeled after Elevate Equality's framework, and businesses large and small embraced the organization's training programs. The education revolution. One of Elevate Equality's most groundbreaking initiatives was its focus on education. Ava believed that true change started with young minds, so she partnered with educators and curriculum developers to create programs that taught empathy, diversity, and inclusion in schools. These programs were rolled out in classrooms across the globe, reaching millions of students. Children learned about the importance of kindness, the dangers of bias, and the value of standing up for what's right. Teachers reported that the programs not only improved classroom dynamics, but also helped students develop critical thinking skills and emotional intelligence. One young student, a 10-year-old named Mia, wrote to Ava, saying, "Your program taught me that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter what they look like. I want to be like you when I grow up." Ava kept Mia's letter on her desk as a reminder of why she did this work. A personal transformation. Amid all the global impact and professional accomplishments, Ava experienced her own personal transformation. The incident on Flight 827 had taught her the importance of self-care and community. She learned to lean on her support network, which included friends, family, and colleagues who believed in her mission. Ava also found joy in unexpected places. During a speaking engagement in New York, she met Marcus, a fellow advocate who shared her passion for justice. Their connection was instant, and over time, their relationship blossomed into something beautiful. Marcus became Ava's partner not only in life, but also in her work, helping her expand Elevate Equality's reach and deepen its impact. Together, they built a life filled with purpose, love, and shared commitment to making the world a better place. A legacy of change. A decade after the incident, Elevate Equality celebrated its 10th anniversary with a gala attended by thousands of supporters from around the world. The event was a celebration of progress and a call to continue the fight for equity. During her speech, Ava reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 10 years ago, I stepped onto a plane as an ordinary woman and left as someone who had been profoundly changed. What happened on that flight could have broken me, but instead, it became the foundation for something extraordinary. She paused, her voice steady but filled with emotion. This isn't just my story. It's our story, the story of everyone who has ever faced injustice and refused to stay silent. Together, we've built something incredible. And together, we'll keep going. The audience rose to their feet, their applause thunderous. Ava looked out at the sea of faces, each one a testament to the power of resilience, courage, and collective action. The final chapter. As Ava returned to her seat, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her work was far from over, there were still battles to fight, injustices to confront, and lives to uplift. But she knew she wasn't alone. She had built a community, a movement, a legacy that would outlive her. In the years to come, Elevate Equality would continue to grow, inspiring new leaders to take up the mantle of justice. Ava's story would be told in classrooms, boardrooms, and homes around the world, a reminder of what one person could achieve with courage and conviction. And as Ava looked ahead, she knew one thing for certain, the journey wasn't just about the destination. It was about the impact she made along the way.